Hi, my name is Mike Gibbs. I run accountsrecovery.net, and I'm excited to bring you today's webinar looking ahead to what 2018 has in store for the ARM industry. This webinar is being generously sponsored by Microbilt. You'll get the chance to hear more about Microbilt a little bit later in our program. Let me tell you a little bit about today's speakers. Gordon Beck is the CEO for Diversified Consultants Incorporated, where he has been employed for 19 years. Gordon is known as a motivator, educator, and great public speaker in the industry, participating in panels, debates, and several industry speeches at industry-related events, as well as contributing articles and content to several call center publications. DCI has opened offices across the country and has more than 1,000 FTEs. Last September, Gordon became the youngest inductee into the Fern Creek High School Alumni Hall of Fame, specifically as a result of his accomplishments in the ARM industry. David Cherner is an attorney with the law firm of Moss and Barnett. Dave is actively involved in the credit and collections industry, including serving on the steering committee for the Consumer Relations Consortium, the Federal Legislative and Regulatory Committee for RMA International, and the Unit and State Affairs Committee for ACA International. Prior to joining Moss and Barnett, Dave was the Chief Compliance Officer for a large market financial services accounts receivable management company and served as corporate counsel for ACA International. June Coleman is a defense litigator with more than 18 years of experience representing local, state, and national clients in complex civil litigation disputes before state and federal courts at both the trial and appellate levels for the law firm of Kroenig, Moskowitz, Tiedemann, and Gerard. Her areas of emphasis include the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, as well as professional liability defense, class actions, and creditors' rights. She has also developed an expertise in opposing attorney fee motions in both state and federal court. Ohad Samet is the co-founder and CEO of TrueAccord, a company using machine learning and behavioral analytics to change the debt collection process. He was recently appointed to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Consumer Advisory Board and is serving as an advisor for Aspen Institute. Prior to that, Ohad headed fraud analytics for Fraud Sciences, a company that was acquired by PayPal in 2008. After leaving PayPal in 2010, Ohad started two companies. Signified is a leading fraud prevention vendor, and Analyze, which develops fraud prevention and risk management strategies for online retailers and payment platforms. Thanks to all of you for participating today. Before we begin today's discussion, I have a couple of housekeeping items. A recording of today's webinar will be made available in the coming days and will be available for download on www.accountsrecovery.net. Also, today's discussion is an audio-only event. There is no presentation component. So if you're not seeing anything on your screen, there is no cause for concern. We encourage everyone to submit questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. Questions must be submitted electronically, and you can do so by clicking on the Q&A button on your Zoom webinar control panel. Finally, while some of today's panelists are lawyers, they are probably not your lawyer. As such, what is said in today's discussion is for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. Nobody should act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to their situation. Whew. Now that that's done, let's get started with today's discussion. And for the first question, I'm going to go alphabetical. So Gordon, this one's for you, and then we'll follow with the quick insights from the rest of the panel. What do you think the ARM industry has to look forward to in 2018?
Well, I can tell you that what we're already seeing is a lot more consumer confidence. I think that, you know, in regards to the recent tax bill that is going to be affecting people's paychecks here in a few weeks, just the confidence that they have, I think, is going to give us an opportunity to recover more dollars. But I also believe that generally, consumers as a whole are looking forward to rebuilding their credit, getting back on their feet, buying homes again. They're rejuvenated in their interest in their credit. And all of that, those types of behaviors ultimately come back and affect us in a positive way. I think everybody remembers last tax season. Not only the delays, the fear of government shutdowns, which seem to have still continued, unfortunately, to a certain degree. I think this year, we're not going to see that. I think that the current administration is going to ensure that people not only get their refunds when they're supposed to and quickly, but I don't expect many delays. And I think this tax season will be the best that we see in a decade. So as a whole, I would say that just overall consumer confidence, their ability to put more cash back in their pocket will also in turn get them to pay their past due bills, start to rebuild their credit, and everyone in our industry will benefit as a result of it.
That is incredibly optimistic and exciting. David, are you as optimistic about 2018 as Gordon is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would agree. I mean, I think a lot of the economic signs are extremely positive. I think that will help the arm industry trickle down, so to speak, to the arm industry. I think that will then drive growth within the space. I also think that will drive growth in adoption of new technology, and there's been a trend already for a couple of years of a lot of those in the arm space starting to use other forms of communication to meet consumer demand. I think the 2018 we're going to see a continued growth in that area.
That will be music to Ohad's ears, I'm sure, and we'll hear from him in a minute. But June, let me talk to you. Let me ask you first. What do you see on the horizon for 2018 for the arm industry?
Well, I think that essentially, I'm going to echo what the first two gentlemen said. I think there's renewed interest in credit, and people are spending. What I see out of that is that people are going to be more interested in what their credit report says. And I've always said that when the real estate market is jumping as it is in California, people like to refinance, and interest rates are changing. And if they've got something wrong on their credit report, that means the possibility of actual damages, which could be substantial in an FCRA claim, and an Fdcpa claim in certain circumstances. So I think you have some exposure for some large dollar cases that are individual cases. And I also think that we're going to see, with the change in the CFPB, I think we'll see a change in regulation from that end. But I also think that we're going to see more regulation on a state level.
Excellent, thanks. And Ohad, let's finish up this first question with your insights.
Yeah, so you're right. It is music to my ears to hear David talk about adoption of technology. I think what we're seeing is, for years, collection agencies have been concerned about using technology for regulatory concerns because of how their clients were thinking and because of how consumers are thinking. We're seeing a big shift there. Consumers are getting used to more and more of the financial services, financial lives being managed online, which means that it makes sense to them to communicate with their debt collection agency as well and think about debt collection as part of their overall financial lives, especially if they are more interested in credit. But we're also seeing major movement with the clients, major issuers, telcos, and so on. What we're hearing in vendor meetings, in sales processes, is that there's a strong push towards using new channels and new technology. And to me, that's a really exciting trend for everyone in the ARM industry, because we can do more, we can use more technology, and that's always more interesting and more exciting.
Gordon, let me circle back to you. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that same theme in the conversation that you're having with your clients?
I absolutely am, and I can tell you that the comment that was just made in regards to the technology and the uses and how we use it. I think that it's important for everybody to know that in order for us to have complete comfort in what we do, we need an industry-wide stand. And again, I know I have to be careful what I say for the reasons, the legality reasons, but we have to start standing up for ourselves. There's no other way to put it. We can no longer be ATM machines for the things that we're utilizing that we know are okay, that we know that there's case law that are proven that they're okay to utilize. And as we go into 2018, there's some things that I am not even allowed to talk about, but I'll hint to that is going to change the game forever in regards to artificial intelligence. and I can already see the predatory attorneys out there that like to make money off of our industry, trying to attack that, when in fact not only is it going to help the industry and our agencies, but it's going to help the consumer more than anyone. So our clients are much more confident, much more optimistic. And again, I cannot stress enough that 2018 is going to be the best year that this industry has seen in over a decade. I'd be willing to guarantee it.
Excellent. Love guarantees. All right, Dave. Let me circle back to you. There certainly has been a trend, and we've talked a little bit about it, of a lot of lawsuits that that have been filed against collection agencies, specifically alleging violations of the Fdcpa, Tcpa, and FCRA. Do you see that trend abating or slowing down at all, or in 2018? Or do you have any tips as to how agencies might be able to, what they can do to stop it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and important. If we're going to have the kind of potential growth this year that we might be expecting, we should also, take the practical perspective that's going to likely generate potentially more claims. Let me focus on one area in particular. Tcpa is interesting because, as we all know and have been talking incessantly about for the last 18 months over this FCC, the ACA lawsuit against the FCC, which there still has been no decision on, that will be significant. We also know that at least since the elections in 2016, we've not seen any movement on meaningful Tcpa reform in Congress, which is also equally concerning. And the FCC has not focused on the issue either. In fact, they're going in a completely different direction. They've been focusing on robocalling, blocking of robocalls, which is very concerning because it doesn't, aside from the fact that it might impede calls to a customer, there's also potential legal consequences as well. Let me just focus on Fdcpa for a moment. Our trend analysis over the last year and a half suggests that the number of Fdcpa lawsuits relative to letter claims is growing. I believe it will continue to grow. I think it is growing in particular parts of the country. It's growing in particular in the Second and Third Circuit, which are the kind of the East Coast states, and then the Seventh Circuit. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but there's been a lot of what I would describe as bad case law, inconsistent case law, specific to letter language, and that is driving a lot of potential claims. So, for those agencies that operate in those circuits or in those jurisdictions, so Midwest and the East Coast, and obviously ultimately anywhere, very important that you review your letter process, re-review your controls, your letter language, all of that, to make sure you have it buttoned up. So that's one area that we think that there will be an increasing trend of Fdcpa claims.
Excellent. Let me pause the discussion for a moment. At this point, I want to stop and just talk a little bit about our sponsor, Microbilt. For more than 35 years, Microbilt has been helping businesses assess and manage risk. They were a pioneer in the now exploding alternative credit data space, and as such have refined their products and services to deliver true business value. Over the years, Microbilt has invested heavily in acquiring best-in-class data. They've built sophisticated systems for keeping the data fresh and accurate, and powerful predictive models for making decisions around lending, leasing, collections, and risk management. With Microbilt, you can customize the products you need and how much you want to spend. All of the products are provided through a simple, single access portal. Whether you're working in originations or debt collections, screening a potential hire or a tenant, planning for growth, or keeping up with regulatory requirements, Microbilt can be your partner, providing the insight and information you need to protect your business, grow your bottom line, and keep your company running smoothly. For more information or to take advantage of a special offer for webinar attendees, please contact John Hambrick at 770-335-6681. Again, that number is 770-335-6681. 6681. Thanks again to Microbilt for sponsoring today's webinar. And now let's return to our discussion. June, I wanted to just circle back and ask the same question to you that we asked David with regards to Fdcpa and Tcpa lawsuits. Are there any trends that you see that you can speak to that you expect to see continuing or slowing down in 2018?
You know, I agree with Dave that I think letter cases are resurfacing, and we're seeing more of those, especially out of the Second and Third Circuit and the Seventh Circuit. But once those opinions come out, you know, those frequent plaintiff attorneys start using those cases in the other circuits. So it's just a matter of time before, you know, we see those same arguments in the Ninth Circuit. I also believe that as new technology, you know, I really think that 2018, you're going to see people in the industry using new technology. And I think their clients are going to be using new technologies. They're going to be using new technologies. And whenever there's a new technology, there's going to be litigation about it to see what the, you know, where the edges are. And I also agree that we need to take some strong positions with some of these issues and fight the good fight when you've got a good case in order to protect the, you know, the economics that, you know, the good economics that come with changes in technology.
Are there specific, you mentioned, you know, seeing new technologies. Are there specific technologies that you expect to see become more prevalent in 2018?
Well, I think that people are trying to find new ways to make money change hands. You know, Bitcoin is a hot thing. I'm not necessarily on the Bitcoin wagon, but people are using mobile apps more. And I also think that there's going to be revolutionary changes in communication technology, whether that's email, texting, phone calls, and then I hesitate to even refer to this as new technology of calling and leaving voicemail messages without actually ringing the phone. You know, that's been around for, I think, a couple of years now, but I do think that that's going to be something that drives litigation a little bit to see where we can end up with that. The idea that you can block people's phone numbers, you know, that's a new, you know, I hesitate to say it's a new technology necessarily, but it's a new tactic that I think will, you know, people will look at as well.
Mike, this is Gordon. I could add to that real quick. Imagine a technology where, for instance, we did a case study, and out of the phone calls that we received on an inbound level, we had 40% of our time removing bad phone numbers. We had another 20% handling bankruptcy, fraud, deceased, dispute accounts, all things that are so vital in terms of compliance, regulation, and obviously to not only to be a great collection agency doesn't mean you're just great at collecting money. It means from a back office end and from a process end that your agents from head to toe are doing everything they can to protect the clientele. Imagine a technology that does all of that for you, not only sending the proper information to the consumer, not only documenting the account, not only speaking to the consumer, knowing what the consumer is saying and ever learning, but to put it bluntly, I would never want to use a technology that would remove jobs from our industry, because our industry is based on great people. People will always be the basis of how we do things in collections. But if we have our people strictly dealing with those accounts that need to understand their bill, want to pay, can't pay, but might need ideas on resources or just need help. And for everything else to be handled by a technology from cradle to grave in a uniform manner as your clients or the regulations suggest, imagine what that would do for the entire industry. Not only would we obviously recover billions of more dollars, but you would also see lawsuits drop, and you would also see consumers issues that are not money related issues where the agents tend to sometimes lose focus, as we all know. That is coming. And again, I can't say too much about it, but in June of this year, the collection world will change forever. And so that is something to be very excited about. And I just couldn't go through this without mentioning that in the technology piece.
So just to maybe wrap this up, Mike, this is Ohad. Just talking about technology, of course, a topic that's close to my heart. We're definitely expecting more use of email, and possibly not only in a way that replaces letters and just reduces costs, but as an interactive way to communicate with consumers over time, which is basically what our product does. And we've seen email, text messages, push notifications, and other channels significantly reduce the use of phone to an extent where we're seeing maybe 1 or 2 call attempts per account per month versus a much higher number for a phone-based collection process. Further, to Gordon's point, whether it's a chatbot or an e-disputes process, which is something that we've been using for a few years now, he's right. It's incredible. I mean, the consumers being able to report on their own what's going on in their lives, asking for data, asking for validation, reporting bankruptcy or identity theft or what have you, reporting financial duress, and for a system to be able to work with them interactively and help them figure out their issue. It does significantly reduce the need for phone interaction because most consumers don't want that. It significantly almost eliminates letter interaction, inbound letters from consumers. So that simplifies that process as well. So there's definitely a thirst from consumers and from clients to see more interactive systems that move away from only a traditional call center model. And yeah, I'm guessing once you use that technology, you can scale your business, and then the best collectors are always going to continue working as collectors because you always need people to handle the most difficult cases. But there's definitely more technology, there's definitely more sophistication involved, and it's working. We're seeing great returns on it with our clients, and I think others who use technology see great returns as well.
Excellent. Now, Gordon, you said you're expecting this year to be the best year in a decade. So let me ask you this: is it just a matter of collection agencies sort of opening the door and letting the floodgates of cash roll in, or are there areas of operation within an operation that agencies should be focused on improving in 2018 to sort of maximize, what a good year you think it's going to be?
That's an excellent question, and my answer is very, very simple. For years, I've always talked about low-level things at conferences that are always ignored. We talk about technology, we talk about regulation, compliance, defense, we talk about everything. We talk about scripting. At the end of the day, I truly believe in my heart that those agencies that refocus into making their agents the very best agents that they can be through training, through helping one another, through the things such as what you're about to do for the collectors, which has never been done, which, by the way, that's not a plug for it. It's just the truth. If we all say the same things now, because at the end of the day, we're all scripted in an environment that used to be hardly scripted at all. We have all pretty much the same technology, with the exception of the few things I was talking about earlier, and eventually we will have all that anyway. No matter how big or how small your agency is, the regulations and the things that we went through to get to this point I believe we're necessary. And as tough as this time has been, in a time where the lawyers, the lawsuits, the regulation are breathing down our neck, and at the same time, our clients are pushing back on the contingency fees that they pay, we have survived one of the most difficult times in the 100-year history of our industry. But if we refocus on making our agents the best they can be, that can speak to a consumer, and the consumer can walk away and say, wow, I cannot believe I just talked to a bill collector. And, last night it was unbelievable. I heard Ray Lewis speaking on the Inside the NFL show, and said, do you want to be proud or do you want to be memorable? And I think what he meant by that is that we can all say that, hey, we got $1,000 payment for the end of the month, but those that are remembered are those whose payment's clear. And we have to get back to the old school of making the people that do the work, the people that we're on the phone because of and write our checks that are right outside our very doors that have been forgotten about. We make them better, it's lights out. We will get back to the 10, 12, and 15% EBITDA margins that we deserve.
This is a great vision from Gordon, but let me throw a slightly different look at it. I absolutely agree that we need to invest in human capital, and absolutely agree that we need the best people around. I've been seeing a lot of pressure from major issuers and from major companies to move away from some of the core tenets of the collection industry as they have been practiced for decades. For example, commission compensation for agents. For example, a strong push on technology. I actually think that while 2018 and beyond are going to be very exciting for the industry, they're also going to be very challenging in the sense of how much technology and how much change is going to be required. Because if a major bank wants to be 50% digitized within a year or two, that means that you can't continue to hire more people. You need to obsessively look for technology, for the technology edge, through machine learning, through digital first communication, through automation of every possible process. And so I actually think that while investing in people is going to continue to be very important, scaling and remaining competitive, and we're seeing a lot of consolidation. I know you have a question about that coming up. Continue to grow, continue to consolidate, continuing to be effective and finding those margins and being competitive with other agencies is going to rely on more technology. And that means on average, less collectors, less investment in phone talk-off, and more ways to finding more ways to leverage technology to work on what consumers are actually looking for and treating them in a way that they find consistent in other areas of their financial lives. And this also connects back to the litigation question. I have to say one of the things that we've seen is, we get litigation threats as well, obviously, but we're seeing it in a much lower rate than we know our industry standards. And we're not a small company anymore the way we were, say, 3-4 years ago as a startup. And to a large extent, at the end of the day, and of course, there are a lot of plaintiff lawyers and this is their business, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a consumer that wants to actually sue you, and they need to cooperate with the process. And it turns out that when you use technology, when you communicate with consumers the way they want, their motivation to sue you and to complain is greatly reduced. So I actually think we'll be pressured, the industry will be pressured significantly on finding new ways to treat consumers, on finding new ways to communicate with them and doing that at scale. And while it's been moving in the background for a few years now, and we've been able to maybe disregard it as an industry, we will not be able to anymore. So I think it's incumbent on every leadership team at a collection agency to think, what does technology does for them beyond just another payment channel? What does it mean to overhaul your technology infrastructure? What does it mean to grow without hiring any additional collectors? And that's a little extreme. And of course, we're not all going to get to that point, but it is a question to be asked.
Very interesting. Let me change gears a little bit. Excuse me. We had another development yesterday in the ongoing saga, I'll call it, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, in terms of who's in charge and what's going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about that. And David, I want to put you on the spot and ask you, do you think the industry is going to see this proposed debt collection rule from the CFPB in 2018, or is that something that's just not going to happen now?
Good question. That's only been asked, every webinar since 2014, it feels like.
Nothing if I'm not consistent.
Yeah, I do not believe that the Bureau will propose a debt collection rule in 2018. I don't think that's a bad thing. What I will my crystal ball will tell me that, and my hope is that. First let's step back. There are a few different kind of trains of thought in the industry. My opinion has always been that I think that the value of a rule will outweigh the value of not having a rule, because I think that there's a lot of areas that can provide clarity that comes at a cost to the industry, but in the long run, that will be beneficial for the arms space. But that's just my perspective. So coming from that perspective, my hope is that the new administration, Mulvaney obviously is the director right now. We learned this morning that a court has denied an injunction to remove him. So he's the director, the acting director as of this moment in time. My hope is that that the administration nominates another director for the full term, and then that director doesn't look at regulation as regulation is bad, no regulation is good. My hope is that they look at our industry in particular and say, this is a critical industry to the economy. They are operating under legal requirements that are horribly outdated, and we have an opportunity to provide clarity to good businesses, to help good businesses thrive, and to kick bad businesses out of the industry. And so my hope is that there is a rule. My hope, though, is that the CFPB takes a step back, looks at the proposals that they've issued in the SBREFA and the Small Business Rulemaking Panel, and focus on the areas that we think there might be industry agreement, such as the limited content message, which would be very helpful not only for voicemail but for in other contexts as well. And then re-engage with the industry to say, what do we really want to focus on? What are we really trying to protect the consumer from? Is it helpful to the consumer to get notice of something that most consumers don't understand or read? What are ways that we can try to, a great example, we're talking about technology. The whole SBREFA proposal was all about, how many calls you can make. Well, the reality is we're not always going to be about phone calls. We're going to be about letters. We're going to be about email. What if a consumer wants to chat with us? What if they want to text with us? All of those have not even been considered. So anyway, long answer, but I don't think the rulemaking will I think there will be a rule, but I would, if this is a year that the arm industry is going to break out and be very successful, I think it's imperative that we use some of that success to aggressively push for change at the legislative and regulatory level, both at the federal and state levels.
It's been suggested, you just brought it up, and I think it's a good point. It's been suggested by others that this is an opportunity for the industry to kind of stand up and go to the CFPB and say, here's what we want, here's what we need, here's what we're asking for, and maybe that this is an opportunity. Do you still see it as that? Yes. I mean, I know from personal experience in working with our friends at the Bureau that there are areas of agreement. There are areas where they understand where the industry is coming from. There are areas where we disagree, and those have to be worked out. But the political climate is different. We can't just think about all this, by the way, as just the CFPB. The FTC is in Republican control.
There are folks at the FCC that are also willing to discuss items worth clarifying in the industry. The Department of Treasury has been looking at the entire credit cycle holistically, from cradle to grave, from issuance to collection, to find areas to provide clarity. Or deregulation is kind of the name, but I would call it regulatory clarity. So I think there's other agencies that the industry should be reaching out to and then coordinating with the Bureau to try to provide a much clearer position on what we want to see. But yeah, I mean, I'm still of the belief that I would prefer, I think that a rule will be more beneficial to the industry than not. That's my take. But so I think there's a lot of opportunity. The question is, are we willing to take advantage of it?
That's a good question. I guess time will tell. June, this is something you had mentioned during your introductory remarks, and something that I've also heard from other attorneys, that, in the absence of a rule or what people perceive to be sort of aggressive enforcement at the federal level, more states will step up and sort of fill that void. You mentioned that you think this is going to happen. Can you talk a little bit more about how you think that the regulatory dynamic is going to shift toward the states this year, and how collection agencies can maybe prepare for that change?
Well, I echo some of the things that Dave just said. I think that oftentimes agencies are happy to be compliant with whatever rules are in place, as long as they're informed of what those rules are. I hear over and over from my clients that if they understood this is what they should do, they would do it. I mean, there really is. I mean, the industry has so frequently done more than the law requires. Take a look at validation. The law requires a confirmation of a letter that says, yeah, we checked and you owe the debt. And some of the case law may require a little bit more information, but I don't know an agency who doesn't supply a lot more information so that the debtor can recognize the debt, oftentimes supplying documentation. And I don't know an agency that doesn't do that, regardless of whether the request comes in under 30 days or over 30 days, whether the request is oral or written. And so agencies are not purposely trying to avoid the law. They'd like to understand the law. And I think that to the extent that states can set up guidelines, rules, laws that actually clarify what's permitted or what's required, I think that's a benefit to the industry. I think that what you're going to see is that there are a number of states that have very proactive attorney generals that have already pursued agencies regarding compliance. And I think you're going to see that more frequently. I think that when with the CFPB, I think you're going to see that the federal government, the executive branch has seemed to indicate that there's going to be a pullback on regulation. So I think that while that sorts itself out, those very active AGs are going to step up to the plate and say, if the federal government's not going to do this, I am. And again, I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily a bad thing if the issue is, make an even playing field. If you're concerned about the number of calls somebody is getting, tell us how many calls to make. How many calls can we make? So I think that is helpful, and I see that as the way that some of the states will step up.
Thanks. Isn't there a possible scenario though where then you've got collection agencies who have to kind of comply with more laws? If I'm in a bunch of states and each state has its own law, doesn't that become a lot more complicated for me, and maybe not, maybe present some problems down the road as well?
I do think that when you have states making the rules, there's, there can be a whole industry on identifying what those rules are in every state. I am optimistic that whatever those rules are in each state, that agencies will be able to comply with them and not have separate rules for separate states, other than perhaps written notices. We already know that there are a number of states with notice requirements, and we've determined how to comply with those in our letters, and the case law has been kind to us in that regard, so that we don't need to send special letters out to 50 different states. But I think if you're talking about how many calls, the rules may vary state to state, but understanding what those rules are, I think you'll be able to develop a process and a procedure that can be in compliance with all of them. It would be nice to operate under one set of rules, though, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Ohad, I want to ask you, and then I'd like to get Gordon's opinion on this as well. What kinds of debt do you think might present more opportunities for collection agencies in 2018?
In 2018, well, I think we're seeing more and more debt, consumer debt out there, right? I just read today, I think consumer debt is up to about 1.6 trillion from 800 billion in 2008. So definitely credit cards, student loans, and so on. But we're also seeing, and I think we've seen a lot of agencies going after healthcare. That's a very interesting, fragmented market that a lot have found success in. I expect that's going to continue.
What about you, Gordon? What do you think what types of debt present the best opportunities for the arm industry this year?
I completely agree with that, with everything he said. I think that if I had to make my best, most educated guess, we've been telecom for 25 years. 5 months ago, we've decided that we are going to now embark out into financial services. And I can tell you that there was a lot of, just like a lot of the big agencies that, somewhat jumped ship when things got really hot. I think that as the credit card companies were also under fire, they bit back too, in their placements, their agencies, their want and ability to sell debt. I'm starting to see now more selling, dealing with great debt buyers, getting paper that way. I think is going to be an awesome avenue for agencies this year. But I believe credit cards make their huge comeback in the third-party collection world in 2018. And I can tell you that because in just the 5 months, and of never doing it before, we've been able to land contracts with 5 major credit card issuers, and we have several more in the hopper, as do several of my competitors that I know. So I know they're looking, I know they're selling again, and I think that's just a wonderful thing for our industry. And so I'd say if there was one out of everything that I agree with the gentleman just said, everything he said is right. I think credit cards is probably the very best opportunity if you're an agency and you're looking.
Excellent. Good to know. I'm going to stop for a second and take a couple of questions from the audience. We're getting relatively close to the top of the hour, so if you do have a question you'd like to ask of the panel, please submit it now, and that way we'll try and get to it before the end of the hour. Here's a question. Can you ask about direct drop voicemail use in legality? Will it continue to be okay? Does anyone want to jump in on that first?
I can do that. I think it's one of those new technologies I referenced, and I don't know that there's any case law out there that supports it. I think that you're going to see some litigation about it. and I'm not sure where the courts are going to end up with it. So I would, I think when you use a new technology, you better use it fast until there's some litigation, and then you have to figure out whether you can continue to use it.
This is Gordon. I'd like to chime in on that one because I played around at golf 2 days ago with the owner of the company that everyone's referring to. And this is actually not new technology by any means. It's been around for almost 2 years now. There has been no lawsuit, so there is no case law. But I think that when the defense is heard, when and if that does happen, I think that, in my opinion, I think it'll be considered just fine. Because we talk about harassment, we talk about interruption, we talk about excessiveness, and when the phone's not ringing, and you're just getting a voicemail, there's no harm in that at all. And if it indeed does become problematic for whatever reason, I think it would be unjust, and it would be just another avenue for lawyers to make money. But, again, in speaking to the owner of the company himself, he is not concerned in the least bit. And actually his company is thriving. And again, with every passing day, more efficiency and more of him reaching out to the people in the federal government that he is reaching out to now to not only encourage them to come out and say it's okay, but to be transparent with this product makes it even better. So that's my opinion on it. We also utilize it, and it's very successful, especially on accounts that we can't always get to, smaller balance, older debt, etc.
Mike, this is Dave. Let me just provide some additional context to what has been said. So for those that are interested or using the technology now, what we know is that there have been a few companies that have actually petitioned the FCC to obtain clarification as to whether that technology, the ringless technology, is compliant with the Tcpa. In both of those instances, and I believe both were filed within the last 3 to 5 years, 2 to 5 years. I know one was submitted last year. Both were withdrawn. So that's why it was withdrawn. I think was based on a number of different potential factors. But the FCC has not ruled one way or another for around that technology. And I do agree that there's arguments to be made that it is not, it doesn't fall under TCPA. But I would caution, just a quick word of caution. As I understand it, and again, I don't know the company that Gordon's referring to, but as I understand it, when we say ringless technology or ringless messaging, not all ringless messaging products are the same. They can operate differently. So if you are evaluating the technology, or if you're using it now but you want to see what else is out there, really understand how does it work, because they don't all work the same. The second is that I know for a fact when reviewing some of these technologies that the phone rings. So these are not 100% foolproof. When they say it's ringless, that doesn't necessarily mean ringless 100% of the time. And I'm not saying that all technologies are that way. But it is very important that as you're using this new technology, as with any new technology, you want to do your due diligence. So make sure to ask the right questions and get the responses that you're looking for. I'm sure the sales rep for a company is going to tell you, yep, it's TCPA compliant, perfectly good to go. But it's your obligation as to your client and to your own business to fully vet that product. So I agree, it provides a lot of benefit, can be extremely valuable, can be used in a lot of different ways. But just a few words of caution, some additional background on that tech.
Thanks, David. I wanted to follow up with you on something. You had said something earlier. We talked about, new technologies that are likely to come on the scene, and we're talking about improved communication and, with respect to what we're talking about with the direct drop or the ringless voicemail or with email or with texting. In a lot of cases, it's not necessarily that they're illegal, but there's a hesitation among the collection agencies because there is no case law. So do you think that people are going to just sort of be more comfortable with it? Or do you think that we're going to start to see some of that case law that will start to put some borders or some framework around what can and can't be done?
Yeah, no, it is a great question, and it is an appropriate question. I mean, for those of you on the call that have to manage your business, you have to make difficult decisions every day to manage your budget, manage your staff, so on. So what I would say is that there's no need to boil the ocean. You don't have to tomorrow go into your management meeting and say, hey, we're going to start using email, ringless drop, text messaging, and websites all in the same day. You want to look at your demographic, the customers you're serving. You want to look at the clients you're serving. You want to look at what technology you can start to focus on, what technology is going to be more concerning to implement, and then game plan it out. It is absolutely true, Mike, that there isn't a lot of case law on email. There's a few, but a few tells us a lot. For example, not a lot on chat and how chat is used in the debt collection context. So what I would say, if I had to kind of prioritize it, I would say for agencies that say, look, we really want to try to implement some technology, but we don't really know where to start. And all this sounds great. Where do we begin? I would say that the first place you should start is your website for a few different reasons. First of all, it gives you a great way to try to get payment from the consumer without having them call you. But trying to create a website that is consumer facing, not client facing, something that you can use in your collection letters, something that you can use in conversations with consumers, can be built. There's been a lot of websites that are out there, so I'd say that it's a technology there's been a lot of reception. I think I heard that, where was it? I think BillingTree did a survey that, the majority of agencies now take them, or like the majority of their payments are done now through the web than over the phone, which is great. That's exactly the trend that I think all of us would expect. So if you don't have a website or you have a limited website, I would certainly encourage you to look at your website for payment and for consumer communications. It's a great way for them to reach out to you. Doesn't mean you can talk to them all the time through the website, but it's a great place to start. And then once you do that, look at our other technologies. The other point I'll add is if you are a traditional collection agency, your collection software, your protocols, your controls are all built on inbound mail, inbound calls, outbound calls. So you're tracking that information, and many of you probably track it with a pretty good level of granularity. As you start looking at new pieces of technology, and this is for those vendors that are on the phone as well, you want to start looking at how to take the data from those other sources. So if you get an email from a consumer, how are you treating that? Is that an inbound letter, or if you put chat on your website and you're going to offer it, that's great. But how are you tracking if a consumer tells you that they don't want to be contacted, but they're going to do it by chat? So what does that mean internally for your collection system and how you manage your data? So as you're looking at other technology, there's a lot of things the implementation of a new technology requires you to reevaluate your existing operations to figure out the best way to incorporate both and make them work together.
Yeah, absolutely agree with David. Absolutely agree with David on looking at the website first. And I'll just add one more comment about data. Data is not only very helpful, absolutely, for compliance, but also to understand what is the consumer looking for. Because if your website offers payment options, then you track anything from browsing pattern to mouse movement to what have you, and how the consumer is looking at options on your website, you have a better sense of what to offer them. And that could be the first step towards a more consumer-facing experience, a more personalized experience for the consumer, something that we've been implementing and we've been using for years now and is working very well.
Thanks, Ohad. Thanks, David. Ohad, I wanted to circle back with you and ask you relatively quickly. We're almost out of time, but gee, we've talked about the trend of consolidation and the number of agencies that are out there. Do you expect that to continue in 2018?
From what I'm hearing, absolutely. It sounds like, I mean, if Gordon's right and 2018 is the best year ever for collections, which, you know, hopefully it is, maybe the trend is reversed, but generally there's advantage to scale in the collections market on compliance and adoption of technology, on acquiring new clients. So based on what I'm hearing and what I'm expecting, absolutely expecting to see more consolidation in the market.
Is that what you're expecting as well, Gordon?
You know, there's a lot that have made deals with investors to grow, whether it's people, clientele, et cetera. I do agree 100% because I believe what I've been seeing is agencies that have been going that route have not been able to do it organically and has actually been forced to go out there and seek out existing agencies already licensed to purchase and bring under the umbrella. I think that, you know, that's not a bad thing. Just because I believe that 2018 is going to be great. You know, I probably said the same thing last year. That's just the way that I've always tried to look at things in a positive light. I think I have more substantiation to say it this year, but I think it's good that agencies are continuing to be acquired. And, you know, the only time it's bad is when you see people that you've grown to know and love in the industry and they're working for their agency and it's purchased by maybe a private equity firm or an operational firm that takes over the company, and then a year from now it's no longer. That's what we don't want to see. But I do believe that, you know, not only this year, but 2019, 2020, I think collection agencies are going to be an extremely hot commodity, not only to merge, but also to acquire. So, yes, I do agree 100%.
Excellent, thanks. Well, we've reached 2 o'clock, but I wanted to go around the room one more time and just sort of get a final thought or a final summary or, you know, one last little nugget of wisdom from each of you just about 2018 and what to expect or what to prepare or where to look. I'll give you guys a fairly wide berth, but I wanted to sort of give everyone a chance to wrap it up again. So, Ohad, I'll start with you this time.
Well, in just a couple of sentences, I think you'd expect me to be the technology evangelist on the panel, but in fact, everyone on this call was the technology evangelist. So 2018 is the year for collection agencies to think about how to take their technology use to the next level, starting from their website, looking at collection communication. And in that way, it's going to be a really exciting and challenging year.
Excellent. Thank you. June.
I think the message I would leave everyone with is that it is a good opportunity as your, you know, the number of people that can pay increase and theoretically your revenues increase and your profits increase, that you don't forget to devote sufficient time to management systems for compliance, and that you get your letters reviewed by a collection attorney, or I mean by a collection notice review attorney.
Great advice. David, your turn.
Well, June just said what I was going to say. So thanks, June. Always. No, I certainly would agree. You know, just to underscore on the technology, it's easy for me as an attorney to say, you know, hey, you know, you got to do right and compliance and legal. The reality is, the question to ask yourself is, would you rather, you know, ask yourself what technology you should implement now, or are you going to wait for the client to ask? Because I think at the end of the day, all of it needs to be compliant. But you know, to be sustainable and competitive, you have to include. You have to start using that technology. And with the review of letters, consumer attorneys review letters. They also review websites and emails and text messages and voicemails. So all of it I would encourage all of it to be reviewed so that you can have a comprehensive analysis of the language that you're using in all of your communication channels, including but not limited to, and this happens a lot of agencies will send the letters that they have in their system, and they don't send the letters that they generate internally and send out for unique types of issues. Those you can be sued on those too.
And Gordon, you get to back cleanup here. Take us home.
2018, again, in my opinion, we need to get back to our roots, because no matter how much technology you have, no matter how much you spent in the future to stay ahead of the curve, or how many letters you send, or all of that, when that call hits that collector, our clients want a great customer experience. People collect money. Technology has never once collected a bill. We have got to make our agents dynamic. We have to get involved, and not just involved, but we need to send our collectors to these movie theaters to see that, this conference, and to learn about this business. We need to get involved in the ACA again. We need to get involved in everything we can and stop waiting for other people to do it. We're in this together. This industry is great, but if we got involved, got together, and we love this industry or we wouldn't be in it, well, let's spread that love and let's educate not our industry, but the consumers we deal with. So when they answer the phone, they can know and trust that they're talking to somebody that they should be talking to, that can help them, and that we are not the bad guys. Change the image, do it legally, morally, ethically. And, I think that 5-10 years from now, if we all do that, not only will this industry flourish, we will all flourish, but our entire economy and every consumer in it will flourish as well.
Excellent advice. And Gordon gave me a great plug for Collector Live, which is an event that's coming March the 20th. A live event will be held in Chicago, but the event will be streamed via satellite to movie theaters in about 26 different markets across the country. We've got a great lineup of speakers, including Gordon. So you can go to www.collector.live to see more information and to take advantage of a significantly reduced registration discount that's available through January 31st. Sorry. So very excited about that event. And then with that, I will wrap up. But before I go, I want to thank June, Ohad, Gordon, and David for their insights and their time today. Definitely this webinar would not have been possible without their participation, because let's face it, no one would have called in to listen to me talk for an hour. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Microbilt for sponsoring today's webinar. Please go to www.microbilt, that's MICROBILT.com, to learn more about the company. Thank you to everybody who signed up and listened and interacted with us today. Please stay tuned to accountsrecovery.net for more news and more webinars in the very near future. Again, also please check out www.collector.live for more information about that event. And everybody, be sure to enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.